Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Deepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Eric Deepen. I'm pastor of the Village Church in Tucson, Arizona, and across from me is Andy Littleton from Mission Church in Tucson, Arizona.
Hello.
We're about, 4 miles apart, our two churches, 4 or 5?
Yeah, pretty close.
Yep. Yeah, we live closer to each other, oddly enough, than our churches are. So we just had a really interesting talk about the Let's Go Brandon, as usual.
It gets more and more entangled, but more and more Let's Go Brandon, metaverse, walking with Jesus in the digital world.
And I'd say maybe 15 minutes into this podcast is when you and I are like, boom, all right, we're really going to talk about some stuff of substance.
That's when we hit our stride.
Which is normally what a coffee is like, by the way. Everybody knows this. You sit down with your buddy, you're talking, you're just catching up, blah, blah, blah. Then something comes up, and then all of a sudden Jesus comes up, and then boom, you guys are into talking about some really substantial things.
And that just might happen with us. But then again, if you want to know what Let's Go Brandon is, I guess you have to listen to the beginning.
Yeah, you got to listen to the beginning.
So thanks for tuning in. Enjoy. And I hope it's helpful.
Hey, Andy.
Hey.
How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing fine. We are just acknowledging pre-getting on the mic that a lot of those topics that we said we were going to be all about, we're really not ready for, truth be told.
This is why the show is you and I getting together for coffee, because never would we call each other beforehand and be like, hey, so I really want to talk about this when I see you. I mean, maybe that would happen once in a while, but it would be things that we couldn't talk about on there.
Yeah. Oh, those things.
Right? I mean, there would be...
I don't even know what they are.
Yeah, it would be personal pastor things. That,
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Joe Smo.
Yeah, all that. Well, so here's what I want to talk about.
All that we categorize in the Joe Smo.
The Joe Schmo
file.
So we were on a retreat.
We did go on a retreat.
And so...
It was fun.
It was.
I enjoyed it.
It was fun, yeah. And so we were disconnected from the world, and probably during that time, or maybe before, and we were just disconnected, this whole Let's Go Brandon thing came up.
Of which, by the way, I'm so culturally out of it that I don't think I would have known about it anyway without you.
Well, right. And I guess I would be too, except that, so I was at my daughter's softball game last night, and I was at the snack bar, and there was a big Let's Go Brandon sticker stuck on the snack bar. And then I used the restroom, and there was one stuck on the urinal, and then there was one stuck on the soap dispenser. And I got on my phone and looked it up, and I figured it was political just because of the type of, it was blue, red, and white with stars, and said, Let's Go Brandon.
So you didn't require a lot of deductive ability to figure this out.
It didn't take too much. And the funny thing was, my first immediate thought was, well, I can't root for my friend Brandon anymore.
I know.
And
sorry, Brandon. You're out, man.
What's even funnier is the Brandon friend of mine who goes to the church. His name is Brandon Brown, and this all started sort of around a man named Brandon Brown. It sort of turns out. So, for those of you who don't know, apparently, as has been true on both sides of the political spectrum, the big F word is being thrown around a lot. F Trump. F Biden. It seems like our new political discourse has been to get on one side or the other and scream
the F word.
The F word. And I'm sure that's going very well and changing a lot of hearts and minds.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the more effective ways of doing political dialogue.
Yeah. And so this was happening at a NASCAR event,
right?
And the F Joe Biden version of it, of course, because that would be the NASCAR edition, it seems,
right?
And then, from what I gather, a reporter interpreted it as being about Let's Go Brandon Brown, who was a NASCAR racer,
and he thought the crowd was chanting
for him.
Yeah. Well, no, the reporter did.
The reporter, yes. And so this has become, I'm sure, a meme, and that part is funny to some degree.
Right.
So now Let's Go Brandon has become the substitute because it's a little more socially acceptable to say than, F Joe Biden. So that being said, so there's one of the dads of one of the softball players, and he has a hat he wears every week that says FU 46, which is the FU 46th president. Another subtle way of and wears it to all the softball games. And generally in our softball world, we had to move a little further to the east side of our city to have a 14 and under team, because some of the other leagues didn't have them this year. And the general consensus is with this guy. So almost everybody seems to be on the same page.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And anyway, so he was yelling to the girls when they got up to bat, let's go, Brandon. So there's stickers everywhere. It's being yelled. And then
oh my gosh, it's crazy how a social cultural phenomenon like this can just spread like wildfire. It's insane.
And so people in the stands are it's like laughing. And then one of them, who I've heard talking about church and stuff, was like loving it. So they're church involved, it seems. And we are new to this whole thing, so we don't know really these people. We're just sitting there. We're we're barely meeting these people.
And you began to taste a piece of the culture.
And we're tasting culture, right?
Wow.
And then so I obviously had just Googled it and went, okay, I'm not surprised, but okay, now I know what it's about. And then somebody had pulled one of the stickers off of the dugout, and one of the girls was like, hey, who did that to the Let's Go Brandon sticker? So all the softball girls are all aware, of course.
Right.
And then I said to Abby, oh, were you already on this train? She's like, oh, yeah, a bunch of kids at Desert Christian, the school, are wearing that shirt. I said, oh, really? So she's like, yeah, it's become the big thing, and they're all yelling it at sporting events and stuff. And I said, do the teachers know? And she's like, probably. You're probably right. I thought, this is interesting. So, and as is true of our softball world, is also true of the Christian school. Generally, though I have never heard any of them say F Donald Trump, the general consensus is that, F Joe Biden. The general consensus is in that direction in this particular piece of the culture, not a general consensus, I would say. So that's just that was last night at the softball tournament for me.
It's so interesting to experience a bit of culture, like just boom, how it explodes, and there it is. It's just everybody's doing it, everybody's saying it. You know what?
And what has, I think, interested me along the way, and this came from, so our church, some of our people just got back from Lake Charles, Louisiana. They just did another hurricane relief follow-up trip. So this is about a year ago. We were there, and this struck me for some reason on that trip as we traveled across the South. Just the amount of these flags and masks with various political things on them, and often the funniest thing is I'm going, I don't think the people selling this stuff give a rip.
Right, they're making money.
So then I'm thinking about all these Let's Go Brandon shirts and stickers, and I'm like, people are just raking in money on this, and people are gobbling it up. I mean, it didn't take long.
No.
For people to produce these stickers and shirts, buy them, and they're saturating Tucson, Arizona, which is not even that, quote unquote conservative. This stuff's got to be blowing up.
It's crazy.
Some young dude is just raking in the dough.
The entrepreneur, Andy Littleton, is thinking about, okay, this is the money behind all of this. The capitalism. Oh, well, it's capitalism. I mean,
it's super capitalism.
It's capitalizing on people's anxieties and fears and political angers and all the other interesting things that go along with that.
Yeah. So many thoughts. I mean, as a true faith over breakfast would be, Eric, I haven't even fully digested this. I'm just
oh man.
I just kind of was taking it all in as I watched my kid play in her tournament.
If you don't know what it is, this is like, hey, there you go.
If you don't know, now you know.
There is a phrase out there that you can go Google and you'll find out a lot about it.
And if you go to our church, you can insult the president apparently and cheer for one of our church members.
Right. All this, at Mission Church. That's the thing.
But I'm not suggesting that.
You shouldn't do that. Yeah, that's not a good idea.
So, okay. Let's
You're
You're
trying to pose a question. I'm like, I don't know if the question. I'm just a little flabbergasted by this whole thing. I'm like, seriously, is this where we're at? Like we're making stickers and we're
Eric. Yes, this is where we're at.
I don't know if I can do this, man. I just don't. I told my daughter at breakfast today. I said, because I'm like, hey, let's just read this out loud. So I read it out loud to her, and she was just shaking her head and laughing. I'm like, I think I need to go bury my head in a hole somewhere. This is just so insane because of how it happened. A reporter misunderstands a bad chant, a terrible chant about the president as "Let's go, Brandon," and then all of a sudden that becomes a cultural thing.
Yeah,
but it's kind of like the plumber thing. What was the one about the plumber? Joe the plumber.
Oh, I forget.
I'm with Joe the plumber or something like that.
So, interestingly, I helped a guy move to Boston, good friend of mine, and he was talking about he's a philosophy student, and he was talking about communication through memes and how effective it is.
Yeah, this is my daughter's major. She does this stuff. Yeah.
And I don't remember enough because he and I had a lot of and really good conversations. This was one of a number, and it's one of the ones I retained a little less on because it was less personal. But it was something that I did come away thinking I underestimate the power that people actually give to memes and how much they shape their thinking. I assume this started out kind of as a meme. It was a cultural, gaffe or whatever.
Right.
And then it became probably a meme, and then it became a movement or something. Right?
Yeah, well, and even if it didn't, like memes, yes, they have this power that I didn't realize.
Yeah. Do they have that power with you?
No.
Yeah, me either. This is part of why I don't follow any meme accounts.
I'm stupid. Like I'm a Gen Xer who's almost 50. I don't even understand memes. I see them and I read one in Facebook and I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
And I move on.
Yeah. I'm not, I'm a little younger. Maybe that helps, but I just don't enjoy them.
But what you're trying to say, and I think this is important, is that little sound bites used to be on the news and used to be on like the radio.
And you'd see it or hear it once or twice.
Right.
And it'd be gone.
Right.
Now it kind of goes into this swirling system where it just cycles and cycles and cycles.
And I think, we also, so let's just, if we're going to talk about media, I think you and I were talking about how YouTube has become long form.
Yes.
And TikTok and Reels are the short form. So everybody's moved. But guess who's on the long form YouTube stuff? You and me. People who are 45 and older, white males, men and women, older women, are all watching YouTube.
Some younger, but
the demographic is overwhelmingly short form. You're in your 30s, you're in your 20s.
And Facebook is 50 and 60-year-old, primarily women, I've heard.
Yeah, so we're all separating ourselves. Certainly there's crossover and all of that, but we're separating ourselves into these places. So A certain group of people are getting all their information long form on YouTube. These, meta interviews, or analyzing an interview of someone else.
And they're still interesting because anybody can be
right. Oh, wow.
A media giant on YouTube. I mean, I don't know how many people in my own church, seriously, a long list, who've been like, I'm thinking about becoming, starting something, a YouTube content channel. And in my mind, I'm still probably back in the Stone Ages or whatever. And I'm going, so why would you be the expert? But then the truth is, I'm on YouTube a little, and I have some years in my field, but, not expert level compared to other ministers. And the whole platform is filled with people who are self-proclaimed experts, really.
Right.
And I don't think that bothers us anymore. So that's the YouTube world. There's that. And then TikTok, and Snapchat, and so it's not even so much the self-proclaimed expert. It's just like the cultural traveler who is just out, like,
I don't even know if yes, there's all of this, whatever's in your normal reel or TikTok feed is usually geared at you in a certain way. But there are people in my church who use TikTok as a video photo book. They're not doing it for anybody. Yeah. It's like Facebook. Like, oh, look, you want to see my motorcycle and see me driving on it? Oh, okay. Or you want to see my baby? They just TikTok it, and it's a short video that they put some music to. I'm like, why do you have it? So they can actually show other people.
And Instagram's moving that way with Reels.
Yes.
And they're trying to push that a lot more.
Yeah, and Reels is connected to Facebook. And blah, blah,
that's all. And then as we've heard, Facebook is
going meta.
They're going meta.
Which is scaring a lot of people.
Sure, yeah. So I've
had a few of those conversations.
Very much getting into kind of like alternate reality. And so they're, in a way, if Facebook seems like it's outdated, it's probably because they're distracted and they're just not really worried about. Facebook just is there, and they're working on the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would guess. And so they're, the metaverse or whatever. And so there's articles out there. You can check that out. So you can basically start living a completely online alternative existence that once was, you could do Second Life or whatever.
Right.
But this is far more integrated into your life.
Yeah. I mean, I think one example that, what's his name from Facebook gave, what's this, the Zuckerberg. Yeah. Like you and I could be sitting here doing this podcast, and then we'd have
avatar with us.
Avatar projected in with somebody else just sitting there, and we would be having dialogue with that person, but they would be in Minnesota.
They don't need to be here. And so it's taking that idea of like the virtual meeting
and bringing it into reality. It's like blending the two.
Yeah, probably one of the earliest versions of this, interestingly, would be the Tupac concert, the posthumous Tupac concert, where the avatar or the digital version of Tupac performed. And it was nothing but a gangster party or whatever with Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, I think. Look how much I know about that.
Wow.
But I think that was kind of an early.
Yeah.
We got to see what that could be like.
Sure.
And it's this weird blend. People said they thought, some people thought it was like a ghost for a bit or something. And it's this idea that this non-reality or former reality or partial reality actually enters in and you experience it. And anyway, so that's all. So what does Let's Go Brandon look like in the metaverse?
I have no idea. I think.
I mean, it could get scary. I just thought of like ways in which we could live out our anger digitally. If you're saying F Trump or F Biden, and you don't think you can, actually, speak to them and attack them, but you could digitally.
Yeah. Well,
and in an alternate way. And
An
what would
alternate way.
what would that do to our souls, our psyches?
And I could kill your avatar without killing you.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
This is where I'm going. Like when I'm saying it could get ugly.
It could get ugly. I think that what my mind and all this goes immediately to is, because I'm a pastor, I'm like, okay, what am I called to in all of this, and how am I to live, and how am I supposed to guide the children of my community into this, because there are a lot of them, and they're all going to be the ones that face trying to negotiate this. And honestly, like, as somebody who, grew up in like the semi-digital world, but by the late 1990s, I was in the full digital world of sorts.
Yeah.
And having to try to navigate all of that was difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a whole new world for me. And, so I know they're natives. They're all growing up in it, and their parents are trying to negotiate it. And there's this there's a lot of values being pitched in a way that they weren't pitched before. Like there's just hundreds of value sets depending on what tribe you belong to. And I think that's also the tribalization. Like we all have these little sets. So,
and to be tribal once meant you probably had to have a physical proximity with these people, and a shared actual experience.
Yes.
Now you don't need the physical proximity. You don't need the actual experience. You can have a digital affinity and experience. But so in a way, you're capable of building a tribe worldwide. Yes. But it's lacking the key elements of what made a tribe good.
Well, and I would agree, because there's the faith over, this podcasts are a digital thing.
Right.
And there's the Faith Over Breakfast tribe.
Yeah. Right. It's got more Eric people than Andy people. We know.
We don't even know that. But I'm talking about the people who live beyond Tucson.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Right. We know that there are people who listen to us in Japan, in Canada, in Phoenix, in California. Yeah. There are people who listen to us all over.
And they might feel they know Eric and Andy.
But to try to mobilize them, like, you and I are better at mobilizing our own churches, right? Because that's this tribe, they're impacted by us at some level. If someone had said, "Hey, do you know Eric?" They're like, "Oh yeah, I listen to him all the time on Faith Over Breakfast." That's the extent of their understanding. But if I say, we're not even capable of mobilizing, not to shame all of you listeners, into emailing us, right? Like there's some who email us, but it's But there's a lot of that.
But we're not calling, in asking for emails, we're not calling people to substantial action that makes them feel more valuable in the world.
Well, hey, we're going to mention their name.
But I'm saying,
make them more valuable in the world.
If we sat down and made a plan to do that, we probably could figure out what would activate people and call them to action. I think that's just true of persuasive ability, and especially if you think about digital tribes.
Well, and maybe we could get Let's Go Fob.
Let's Go Fob. It's not going to work.
It's not going to work. No. Please send us a sticker of Let's Go Fob.
Yeah, no.
We'll put it on our studio and take a picture of it.
But hold on, really quick.
Andy feels like this conversation, which is just a coffee, it's going nowhere.
It's spinning out of control. No, I think this is really deep stuff. I mean, where we were at, the affinity that you're building in these tribes, this is very different, but it's also very disconnected. So you've got simultaneously people are joining tribes worldwide, but then there's the deepest sense of loneliness and disconnectedness our society has ever seen.
Yes.
Another question that I think we have to engage as Christians is if we were to take the Sermon on the Mount and assume that it actually has broader application than only the things that are in it. So if you were to take the principle that Jesus lays down concerning, say, adultery, where he says, look, you're not just guilty of adultery when you've actually, slept with someone else's spouse.
Right. So when you think about that,
When you think about
person lustfully.
Now, what does that mean for us as Christians in the digital sphere to say, so let's go, Brandon? It feels very much like, oh, I didn't say any of the words. I wasn't as crass and vulgar.
Sure.
But what does it mean for this whole where our society is headed with the metaverse and how you can live this alternate reality? I mean, essentially in there, Jesus is saying you don't have to live the physical reality to be dealing with sin here.
Right.
And God is present in the metaverse, by the way, right?
Right. And
so how do we lead through this? How do we speak to each other? What would you say to if someone at the softball game is a member of your church, or the people at the school or whatever, how do we engage this? Where do we go with this?
Well, I think that honestly, I think this is when the local church and strong local church culture is important.
I agree.
And I think this is when you are offering an alternative that is, but at the same time being extremely welcoming. I think people have to know that something has to be really substantially different.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And what's presented on both political worlds and their religious affiliations, so right and left, and then their religious kind of affiliation, is really a mile wide and an inch deep in character, in grace, in truth, in mercy, and an unwillingness to deal with complexity.
Yeah.
That is what I've seen our culture has no patience for complexity. We need a quick answer. We need a quick solution. And this goes back to the meme. We need a meme that solves that problem. We need 3 words that summarize an entire argument about something.
Right.
And anytime things get complex, then they get there's doubt that enters. Complexity brings doubt. And so when you have doubt, you begin to feel uncomfortable and you don't know what you believe. And then you think that people are undermining truth.
And you don't feel secure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think, I used to mock the "What would Jesus do?" bracelet, and I mean, there is a band that took a lot of the phrases like "What would Jesus do?" and they labeled all their songs that as the subtext, so all the different phrases, and then they had the opposite. So what would Jesus do? And then the opposite was, what the hell am I going to do?
Yeah.
Which, excuse my language there for a sec, but that was what the phrase was. And I think there's a little bit of those two things that we have to live in, is what would Jesus do at the ballpark?
Right.
And what am I going to do?
Right.
How am I going to do that in response? So the question is, one, I'm not going to say, let's go, Brandon, because I now know what it means. And I wouldn't say, I would have looked at somebody what? Sure, her name's not Brandon.
Well, right, and that's
my first response, because I'd be so ignorant.
Me being behind and not being on TikTok or whatever, that's where I was, just for a second, was
wait, what? There's a girl named Brandon?
Who's this Brandon?
Who's this Brandon lady? But the other part is, I want to be someone who, you talk about the Sermon on the Mount, I want to be someone who's meek. I want to be someone who is gentle and kind, and so. How do you build cultures that way? Well, you model it repeatedly. You teach people. We all have to be uncomfortable. Yeah, it's okay to know what we believe, but we have to stand uncomfortable, because that's how the gospel goes forward. Yeah. So I think what I think the church is called to now, no matter what size you are, is to divest yourself politically, and to stand as an alternative that invites people in and says, look, this is a different way of living with Jesus. We're not actually about the machine. We're about Jesus. Right. No matter what we look like. We can be 2,000, 10,000 people, or we can be 80. Doesn't matter. It's Jesus is centric, and not Jesus, yes, doctrine, and we need to preach good, foundations. But I'm talking about, what am I doing in my day-to-day life that is imitating Jesus and has the mind of Christ. Like, that's what we're about. And I think instead what we're about is I need to have the mind of Trump, or I need to have the mind of Biden, or I need to have the mind of some person on YouTube, or some,
or whoever has the more powerful voice. The interesting thing about the Let's Go Brandon stuff and the stickers and the flip side of that, I mean, there were people, there was a lot of F Trump stuff out there too. And
sure.
And it felt exactly the same. By the way, I feel like I should say it is exactly the same.
It is exactly the same. No, it's not any different.
But there's a certain, you feel like when you've got the shirt, the sticker, the meme spreading, you feel like you're part of the powerful voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and I think here, and I'm going to push on something, and I want to say I love Brene Brown, but more people come to me and say, have you read, seen, or heard Brene Brown's recent thing? And this hasn't happened a lot recently because she hasn't done a lot.
That was another one we were going to discuss.
And
actually.
We probably should. But the thing is, most people don't say, wow, like, understanding vulnerability completely changed when I began to really think about Jesus in the Gospel of Mark.
Right.
Have you seen the vulnerability of Jesus in the Gospel of Mark?
Right.
Like, you should be talking more about the vulnerability of Jesus in the Gospel of Mark. Nobody says that. But who's the originator of vulnerability? Jesus. Like, he's the one who has more to say than Brene Brown has about it.
Well, and frankly, I watched the Brene Brown special, and there was some stuff that was very good.
Oh, it's really good.
But then there were moments where I went, hold on, this just became very inconsistent.
Certainly.
Right? And so there were, rather than encourage vulnerability in your views on homosexuality, she just made stark statements of the way it ought to be.
Right.
And so all of a sudden...
She alluded. She was careful not to...
Yeah, she's a good... public figure. She knows not, but she didn't encourage vulnerability in your actual thoughts there all of a sudden, and that I found that interesting. But overall, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in there for sure. But
I'm just saying that it doesn't need to be Brene Brown. I mean, I've had it, 20 years of being 100%. Pastor. There's like been 20 people who are like,
there's always the new
quintessential, person. I think Jesus, he gets like second fiddle a lot.
Totally. I'm tracking with you.
In like churches all over the place, including mine.
Yeah.
And I think we gotta shift back to Jesus. I mean, that's what we're about.
Yep.
And so maybe it means, and maybe it's really good. Maybe somehow, and I don't want to pat myself on the back or even you, but maybe it's good that I didn't know about the Brandon thing.
Right.
I don't need to know about the Brandon
because your eyes weren't on those channels, looking for anything. Yeah,
and I think it's okay for then someone else to catch me up. And yes, we need to be politically aware, but I don't know if I need to be politically aware of the Let's Go Brandon.
Yeah,
right. I think, and the information overload in all of this, no doubt. So I don't know. I think,
well, that was I'm not necessarily advocating for everybody should have known about this. It's more now that we know, what do we do?
Yeah, well, we can tell people about it.
But
we're informing you.
We're a news show. Now you're in the know, and everybody's going. This has been going on for months, guys. This is so over.
Where did Johnny come lately? So,
but you realize that. So what I realized at the softball game was, this is something. There were two little children sitting in front of me. And the entire why do we go to baseball and softball games? They were a game we would watch.
Right.
Nobody's watching.
Well, it is baseball.
No, I'm telling you. Yeah, because we've all lost our collective... you're going to get me on my baseball bandwagon. We have lost our attention span. Like, the baseball used to captivate our entire nation because we didn't need everything to move fast. But these two little kids are sitting in front of me the entire time on the phone.
Right, watching.
Just video to video to video to video to video. And they weren't even watching the same ones.
Right.
They were on separate parents' phones, just video to video to video. Little guys. Like, we're talking 3 or 4-year-olds. And then you look around and it's like, oh, yep, all the adults are doing it. Like, there was a grandmother sitting right in front of me watching cooking like reels on Instagram instead of the game. And I had moments myself where I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to answer this email and stuff between innings. I wish I could just put it away. But so what I realized when I'm sitting there, everyone there seemed to be indoctrinated with "Let's Go Brandon." They knew it.
Right.
They knew what it meant. They knew it. They were all there. And as people who are like, we want to be disciples of Jesus, I think our indoctrination level on Jesus is super low. I mean, that's true. I mean,
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I think, and we have a hard time paying it. Yeah.
Because Jesus is not a meme.
Jesus is not a meme.
That's
my new meme. And Jesus is not a meme.
And you walk with him. It's slow.
Well,
and it's not quick. It's not sound bites. There are some potential sound bites of Jesus, I suppose, that could be valuable, but I don't even know if they are. Anyway, the great thing about this moment is that Eric's on his phone. Jesus, you walk with him.
Yeah, well, and I was talking to my wife about this just a couple of days ago, and about being a pastor, and about how you understand yourself, and how so much of it is built around growth, numbers, people moving, making disciples, being. Yeah. There's so much like this is shop, I know, but there's such an analysis of value based on the things that are happening in your church, and there's no understanding that actually planting a garden of faith takes time. Yeah. And to have the fruits of the Spirit, meaning the Spirit gives you His fruit, has to be nurtured, developed. An open heart has to be created. It's not developed by a meme. It's not developed by a quick, hit. It's a communal walking, an individual walking with Jesus, and really pushing in really hard over a long period of time to develop something rich and good. And it's really hard in this culture to do that. But what I hear all the time from is there's some kind of measure of success. And so we have a value of success that we have to understand ourselves as doing well by this, how many people are being baptized, how many people are coming to Christ, how big was everything on Sunday. And even you and I have churches where we're like designed to be small. We still, maybe it's just me, but I know what you do, walk away on a Sunday either really excited.
Oh, no doubt.
And it does not have to do a lot of times. Like, I could have 5 people in my church mad at me, but if the church service was completely packed and kind of had an energy, I would be much happier than if it was a smaller evening, but 2 people came to me and talked to me about how Jesus had really pushed them into a place where they had moved out of things they were struggling with, and to get to know Him better. So I think this has just permeated everything, that fast moving, everything has to be here now. I need to understand things now. I need to know things now. I need to now.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And then the other thing, and I think there's a lot to work out on this, but so there's a Gospel Coalition article on the metaverse, and it's fine. It's pretty short, but it is a brief introduction. So you could look up TGC metaverse, I guess, if you wanted to get a little tutorial, but one of the things they were getting at, and I do think this is true, is we can't just as Christians be like, it shouldn't be like this. You should just read the Bible and walk with Jesus, and that's where it's really at. Because people are going to be living in the meme and the metaverse world, and that is our mission field.
Yes.
And we're not as detached from it as we'd like to think. We're
sitting on a podcast talking about.
We're talking, on a digital platform, and so somehow we need to learn as Christians, how can we exist in this type of world and really carry the values and the person of Jesus with us there, and how can it shape our interactions? How can it challenge us? How can it allow us to lay it down and walk away from it when we need to, probably a lot. There's a lot that we need to unpack as people to know how to faithfully walk with Jesus in this world. But it doesn't mean just criticize it and act like it's not there, because it's not going away.
No, I think part of it is living an alternative life in the midst of the community, the larger community.
And I think that's what being the city on a hill, the city on a hill is visible to everyone. The light in the dark room of Jesus's teaching is visible, and so it can't be, you can't run away.
Right.
But it also needs to be unique. It needs to be Jesus shaped. And so people need to be encountering Jesus in the church, in its people.
Right. And I think here's my major complaint about people who are followers of Jesus who want to do this. They walk into a room and they want to compel everyone else to live by grace and truth instead of living by grace and truth themselves. And I agree with you that to be the city on a hill is not to convince necessarily, it's to be faithful. Right.
In the midst.
Yeah.
Right.
I think some of that means, if you want, what I'm saying is a big sacrifice. Try to reduce the amount of time you have on your phone. Begin to practice disciplines personally and get together with Christians as much as you can. Right. Not to hang out and have fun in the sense of like, hey, we're going to go play board games. Hey, we're going to go hiking. Right. Hey, those are all good things. I think those, and you should do them. But if you're not doing them with the sense of, and there's going to be intentional conversation about Jesus, and there's going to be intentional thought about Jesus, even if we're not talking about him all the time, that's going to permeate everything that we do. A lot of times I think we compartmentalize Jesus to spaces. Like, I'm going to go think about Jesus when I go to church on Sunday, when I go to Bible study. But we need to have him with us all the time. We need to understand that he's with us all the time and that he's a living and active through the Spirit conversant in what we're doing. And
in a sense, I know this is a nuance, but I'm imagining myself at the softball game, and I could imagine Jesus sitting next to me, and that's one thing to go, well, Jesus is watching, he's here, I wonder what he thinks. It's another thing to imagine that Jesus is fully indwelling me, that I am his person here.
Right. Well, let me extend that. So you have you standing there, or sitting there, fully indwelled, and Jesus sitting next to you for the imaginary kind of thing. But Jesus, my thing is, Jesus he's going to feel deep love for all the people and deep grief.
Yeah.
And what he's inviting you into is to be compelled by his deep love and his deep grief of and what's going on in that situation.
And I'm saying when he indwells you begin to take that on. It's like he's not just there and you go, oh, he would feel this way. I
feel this way.
Yeah,
and I think that what's interesting is there's an opportunity for you to actually be an active person in prayer. And I think this is kind of what I think people don't realize is when you're sitting in there and you're like, oh, I enjoy softball, and yet I'm grieved by these two young children who are watching their TVs basically.
And it was like something was happening in my soul as I watched it.
And there's an opportunity to say, God, like I just pray for these kids, like that this is not a thing that consumes them. Like can you intervene in their life? I think we think, oh, that's not whatever. And that's powerful. That's you going into a dark space and asking God to invade it. Yeah. And I think we don't think about those things as much.
We just get annoyed at the parents.
Yeah.
And that's what tends to.
Yeah.
I did feel the grief, actually, now that you mentioned. And I'm glad I didn't know who their parents were. I couldn't tell. Anyway, so I couldn't even be mad at specific parents. I just had no clue. But but it just felt like it was that grief of like, what is this gonna do to them? Like, how are they gonna have deep relationship? How are they gonna know God when these just like incessant screaming characters are all they can see?
Yeah.
And that's really good. And then but that's a good encouragement. Enter into spiritual warfare in a sense, like get in it right there.
Yeah. Sounds good.
All right.
Well, I think we should wrap this up.
I think we just did.
Awesome.
Hey, really quick though, you can always reach out to us via email. We apparently have a long list of topics that we could talk about that we just need to apparently sit down and take in some media to be able to talk about. So maybe it's good that we can't, because we just aren't getting around to that.
Right.
Which is fine.
Actually what we found is that we really enjoy answering your questions.
We love it. Yeah.
We think that that's the best part. And so if you have questions, it is faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com. But we also are running our special thing. It's get a free book from Andy and Eric's bookshelf. All you got to do is...
that's right.
You say this at every podcast, but just email us at faithoverbreakfast with a question and your address, and we will answer your question, mention you on air, and send you one of our books that we've already read and we don't want on our bookshelf. You
got to tell us a little bit about yourself so we can give you one we think will actually be good. And faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com.
Yes, gmail.com.
Anyway, thanks for joining us.
Yeah. You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.